What's up, everybody? I'm Rick Beato. I'm joined today by Joe Perry and Brad Whitford from Aerosmith, two guitarists whose interplay defined the sound of American rock music. Their two-guitar approach, weaving riffs, harmonies, and counter melodies, set the blueprint for countless rock bands that followed, including every one that I've ever played in. Before we move on, I'd like to remind you to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Here's my interview. Joe, Brad, it's an honor to be here. Joe, thank you for inviting me down here.
Sure enough.
So if I were to ask you guys, other than Aerosmith, what is a great, like, quintessential rock riff?
Train kept it rolling.
Any riff, not Aerosmith?
Any riff, not Aerosmith. Any riff can
Dazed
be.
and Confused, like, blew my socks off.
The thing to Train kept it rolling, and especially if you follow the history of it from when it was a swing. The lyric is exactly the same as like the Yardbirds version or the Aerosmith version, but to hear it played by a 19-piece orchestra without any of that riff, and then it morphed into the 50s when the brothers that did it, and every song they did had that riff, so they added that to it, and then the Yardbirds did it, and that was the glue. I mean, so many musicians that we know that came up around the same time. That song is kind of like, well, we know that one.
Great story about Train that I always thought was hilarious. I think it was in Chicago. We were playing with Jeff Beck back when Max Middleton and
Yeah.
what's his name was on drums. Some kid came up to me after the show, and he was like, "Man, I couldn't believe Jeff played your song." But in one of his songs, he played a few bars of the Train lick. And it was just so funny to me that this kid thinks he's playing an Aerosmith. He thought he was making a little tribute to us. Just like,
well, another angle on that one is at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when Jeff was getting inducted, not for the Yardbirds, but for himself as a solo artist. Metallica was the band, because they always have a band that, and they didn't know the song. They'd never played it before. And I think, let's see, Ronnie was there, Jeff was there, obviously, and Jimmy, and I was there, and all the Metallica guys, and they needed the teleprompters to get them through the song. And it fell apart after the first riff. I mean, it's like you can count on that because everybody's got a different version of it in their head. And that's why I always fall back to the original Yardbirds one because it's got the best of both worlds. It's got the guitar riff, it's got the vocals, and the lyrics. So it was no fault or anything like that. It just showed the different generations of, wow, the first time I heard that was it for me. It was funny. I mean, I watched the thing because all I remember is it just like, it sounded like a train wreck, which is, it wasn't as bad. When I watch it back, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, but it was.
And trust me, we know what train wrecks sound like.
Okay, so when you guys were making your first record, had you guys done much recording before that?
This was old school studio, and I mean, some of the stuff was literally made out of cardboard in the control room. But old school, it was like in the movie studios, there'd be a red light on, don't come in and out, we're shooting.
Yeah.
But they had a red light over the door, and we could run through a song, go, yeah, all right, let's do it. And they'd hit and that red light would come on. We'd mess up because we got nervous, like, oh, we're laying it down now. Instead of being playing, we started thinking. They quickly realized that the red light had to go. And then the next trick was, okay, let's run through it one more time before we do it. And then, we'd run through and you go, okay, you ready? And you go, now we got it.
Right.
That's it. We learned early on to keep the tape rolling. because that was always going to be the take. Without that, we call it the red light blues, you know, and but you know, I mean, it's like that's back when you couldn't really. I mean, we had to get a good take, and nobody wanted to be the one to screw it up. So there was all the pressure because you like wanted to get a really good basic track because you know there's always a little bit of leakage, and you know, like something might bleed into the drums, and it would be, you know. And it wouldn't be a good take, but you wanted to have it get the energy. And, you know, you might have played the song like, well, maybe not 1,000 times at that point, but, you know, playing it in clubs and stuff, and you probably played it great. But when you knew the thing was recording, that was it. The next time I had that feeling was we were recording Heroes in the same studio that Bowie recorded it, and we wanted to cover it. And so we'd run it down. We were on the road and playing the song, you know, pretty much every night. And, you know, we're all playing live, bleeding into the room. And the engineer says, "Do you want to go right to disc?" Which was, I'd never done that, you know. And it was like Alice and I looked at each other like, I never did it before, and none of us had. So it was that same feeling of like, if you screw it up, it's done because you're going right to the cutting room, you know.
Yeah.
And so it was that same feeling, you know. I mean, we got to get it right, or else I don't want to be the one to screw it up. So,
You know, back in the early days when you didn't have, you know, you had, I think we were recording on 8-track back then. So it took a lot more preparation. You didn't like, oh, don't worry about it. We can, you know, we got 24, 32 tracks to play with, you know. You didn't have any options. And I thought it made it, to me, a lot more interesting. Everything was a performance, even a mix, you know, because every time you did a mix, that was it.
Right,
you
no
didn't have a
automation.
computer remembering what you did. You
Yeah.
had to wait for the tape to rewind.
Yeah.
You know, and you'd have 3 or 4 guys on the board like we're in a record plant. And so everything was a performance. And it was just, and you had to plan out. Like Rocks and Toys are on 16 tracks. And I have some of the track sheets. It's just cool to, you know, one track you've got background vocals and tambourines and cowbells all on one track, and then there's a guitar solo tucked in there. Because you had to like use any space you had free, you could take advantage of. But,
yeah,
you know,
so
2
you'd
tracks
have to
for drums. The drums were on track 1 and 2, and then you might have and then the bass, and then.
Would you guys do basic tracks first on the early records, and then do or would
Not
you
on
just,
the early records.
Early records,
were
everybody played together, and that was the rhythm track.
live.
We
The
always
whole thing
played
was
live, even all the way down the line. We always did all those Fairburn records. We all played live.
Did a lot of like with Jack and with Bruce, we really made a point of being really ready enough to play them live, and know them so well, you could just lay into it. You weren't thinking about what's the next, you know, you just could play it, and the preparation really paid off. You get that.
Did you guys edit the multi-track? You know, take a take, like we'll take the first half of the song from this take, and grab the second half from another take and put them together.
That was the
happen?
razor blade
I think
days,
we did
man.
that.
No, nobody does that anymore. We'd literally, you know, we'd be sitting there going, "What are you doing?" You know, you'd be taking a razor blade to a 2-inch tape and go, "How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that?" And then you walk the process, and we would always use the kick drum. Remember? Boom,
Yeah.
boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, because the tapes went in at 30 IPS, there was enough going by that you could actually fix which was amazing to us to watch this, but you're actually cutting the master of a great take and like taking out an inch of tape.
Like if a beat was dragged or something.
Like say the guitar didn't have like a hiccup in it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even if you play into a click track, if you're not playing, you know, you still have to get in the groove and hit it. You got to have that feel. And fortunately, our band, had I think Aerosmith has a funk element to it that a lot of other bands didn't. And I think covering James Brown songs really helped us. So our time always had kind of a feel. Any song, it always had kind of a little more of that, swing to it. There's rock and then there's roll, and I think we had a little more roll than a lot of other bands.
We're not like a click track band because of the feel we had. Really interesting. We started re-recording some material, because there was a period where if you use the original, you're gonna. Sure. If you redo it, you don't have to. It'll be yours. And we were in Boston. We were recutting "Sweet Emotion."
Yeah. Which
we didn't record to a click or anything, and so we cut it, and we're sitting in there going, what's wrong with it? It just doesn't work. Because
you cut it to a click.
We were using a click,
and
the click was based on the first couple of bars of the song.
Yeah.
We'll come to find out, after going back, the end of the song was 2.5 clicks faster than the beginning. And it just kind of went on its own little...
Yeah.
And it didn't, when you listen to it, it's just like, you never think that.
And it builds the excitement when that happens naturally, if you listen to Honky Tonk Women, listen to it all the way through, and then go directly back, and it starts again, and it's like noticeably slower. And it's like just the natural thing, because they're not playing to a click track.
When you listen to the beginning of Sweet Emotion, I'll play the beginning of it here.
Sitting in Studio A, and that was at the Black Free Pickup Custom.
What was that again?
He was played that rhythm guitar track, it was a Les Paul Custom. It was a vintage, I think it was a 59 or 58. And it wasn't ours, it was somebody had loaned it to us. But it was just like kind of looking for the sound, and that guitar just stepped up and went, that's it, that's the tone.
Some of them you just plug in and that's it.
What amps were you guys playing in this period?
Mostly Marshalls, probably some Fenders. I was using Marshalls from the get-go. Certain point when a bunch of those amps, we had bad luck. We were in Studio A in the record plant, total lockout.
Yeah.
Right, nobody can go in and go out. We'd come in one day for a session, and our best Marshall heads are not there. And there's no explanation. I got the only key, this and that. It was like unbelievable.
No.
So we eventually had to switch to some amp pegs. The Stones were using the amp pegs, and went, well, that's working for them.
But that's not amp pegs there, that's Marshall.
No,
right?
that's Marshall's.
I would bet
pretty much.
That's Marshall. I might have used the Studio Twin. Most studios will have their studio amps, and they're been tweaked and everything, and kept up really well. And because they've played so much, they have a sound. So I know that the Twin, the Fender Twin, might have showed its head on some of these tracks. And
yeah.
like Brad said, we were using Ampeg V4 heads.
Great
because
heads.
Just not the giant ones, like this, like those 300-watt monsters, but
Yeah.
In the mid-'70s, it was much harder to find a good Marshall because the killer ones were the late 60s and early 70s, and then they lost something, and because the first ones were made out of Army surplus stuff.
yeah.
Well, did you use gain pedals or anything like that? Anything in the front end?
I didn't. I didn't use any pedals back in those days. It was just a cable straight in. It's like, you better be able to play good. Eventually, when we discovered like the tone bender
Yeah.
and stuff, we got into.
Well, it was before we had master volume, and like amps have changed over the years, so that a lot of the sound is just the amp, because you're overdriving the amp, the preamp going into the power amp, and you'd hear stories about, like, say, Leslie West used a Fender Champ into the Marshall, the front end of a Marshall, to get that sound. I mean, tried it, and the hum was like ridiculous. So I don't know. I mean, but you hear this stuff secondhand, and you wonder. But that's why all that shit was pretty much handmade. So like, you might get a great Marshall and another one not so great, and they also were like kind of like Harley Davidsons. You kind of had to travel with a toolkit, because when they sounded the best is right before they blew up.
Right before they blew up.
And, you always had to have a spare one, going on. And people didn't realize that, like, the tubes, when they're glowing hot, it's also like a sign that they're getting pummeled, and the chances are you're going to blow something up. But people would also, like, put the amp on end so that they would get hotter, and they would leave them on all afternoon, and, so it just went from amp to amp. And sometimes somebody would say, well, if you put a capacitor here, and I remember being in the kitchen in the apartment, and we would taking them apart and trying to solder something on there to try and get a little more gain out of it. The thing is, you can also overgain it. I mean, there are so many amps now that have all the drive you need, because the power, the high gain amps. But then guys take like a fuzz tone or a power drive amp and foot pedal, and you're defeating the purpose of what the amp is doing. The physics are all pretty basic, It's like, where do you get the push and to get the tone? And it can go either way. Like, if you have an old Bandmaster that barely breaks up, then that's a good candidate for a fuzz tone or a drive. Yeah. But then if you have a really great sounding Marshall, you don't need anything in front of it,
Did you guys play takes and go in the control room and listen and say, okay, this is a good one? Or if you were working with Jack producing, would he say, okay, we got the take? What was the process of making records back then?
That's it.
We would almost always, oh, that one. We'd go listen. Yeah. Jack would go, come on in.
When you had the limitations with limited amount of tracks, 8 tracks or 16 tracks, and you might only have, we have a little space for an extra overdub here. We can do a shaker. We can do whatever it is. Do you think that was actually beneficial to?
Well, I think it made you play. You played better. I mean, I think that I don't know. I don't know, man. It's like trying to say, that listening to vinyl is better than listening to a CD or listening to a downloaded whatever. I mean, it's really a matter of taste. I think people are missing out on what it used to really sound like. When you were talking about seeing Jimmy at the Boston Garden, and they were probably using the house PA system for the vocals.
Sure.
They didn't think about, like, putting putting mics on the amps or the, I mean, it was hit or miss back then because they weren't ready for the enormity of it. I mean, the whole thing, and it's fascinating if you think about it. I mean, electric guitar as we know it, electric guitar, not just a loud acoustic, but electric guitar with distortion, sustain, feedback, and all that. It did not exist as an instrument until the 50s.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just getting a louder version of an acoustic guitar and people pounding on the thing because it was a rhythm instrument. There were people experimenting with it was never a solo instrument back then. I mean, it was like, but there were guys that were starting to feel that out, There was some jazz guys that were realizing, look, the single note, this might sound pretty good if I turn that up. And most of the stories about distorted guitar, the legends, are mistakes. Like you hear the story about Rocket 88. They went in and the amplifier fell off the top of the car that they were touring with, and then they plugged it in and it sounded broken. And the guy said, oh, well, let's use it anyway. There's that legend. There's like 2 or 3 legends about the first time a guitar was distorted, but that was just the birth of it. And so we were fortunate enough to be growing up at a time and being influenced by the time when the pioneers were picking up guitars and making them sound like no one had ever heard it before. When Jeff had his fucking fuzz tone, I mean, what a sound. What is that? It sounds like a saxophone kind of, and we watched these pioneers picking up these guitars, and it was like people never heard that sound before. I mean, nobody ever heard the sounds that Jimi Hendrix was making before in history.
Right.
And along with that came the technology to record it. I mean, we were 40s and 30s. You were, they were still making 78 RPM records that if you dropped it, it would literally break.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we grew up in a period in history. We all did, where we heard this music, and it was like based in the blues, and a lot of it jazz. Some of the best rock players in the day were jazz players. Johnny Johnson came down, and we were doing the honking on Bobo. We had decided we didn't want to have any guests on the record because so many people heard we were doing a blues record, and they said, "Yeah, can we come and sit in?" And it was like, who are we gonna say yes to? You know what I mean? And so we kind of like said, okay, we're not going to have anybody. We're not going to bring any guests in because we're going to leave this one out. You can't. So we said no guests. But I was sitting there reading the newspaper. When people read the newspaper, and I saw that Johnny Johnson was playing at a club in town, and Johnny Johnson, who was the keyboard player for all of Chuck Berry's best stuff, and he was a big part of that sound, being a jazz player, and so we made a phone call. I called John up, and he got in touch with his road manager, and he was in a limo 2 hours later coming down to the studio to play. And the first thing he did, I had a Steinway that was all mic'd up, and he said, nah, that's too much work to play. Because it's hard hitting the keys to get and he was used to the electric keyboards by then. So we set one up downstairs, and he sat down and he said, before we even played him anything, he said, listen, I'm a jazz player, but they pay me to play rock and roll. And then we played him, a couple of tracks, and he played on a couple of tracks, and we're sitting there like with our jaws dropped. This is Johnny Johnson, who played on Chuck Berry's record, basically part of the sound, that thing that And I mean, we were asking him questions between the stuff and hearing the stories about, you know, no drinking in the car. So they would hold the bottle outside the window, you know, and it was like, because, I mean, we'd heard some of those stories, but to actually hear it from Johnny Johnston was like, it was amazing. I mean, but those guys were jazz players. I mean, Mitch Mitchell, one of the best drummers to come out of the, we all know him as Jimi Hendrix's drummer, but he was a jazz player.
Yes.
You know, and he was something else, man. And he just was the perfect drummer for Jimmy because they had that sound and they worked together so well. And it was, but a lot of them, I mean, they learned the jazz stuff, so they had but, you know, rock and roll's a different animal, you know.
One of the things that you were talking about, Brad, that Joe referred to, that was about you seeing Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, that in the days, this 1969, long before, you know, PAs even really existed to any extent. You know, I mean, PAs were designed for people giving speeches in big halls, and it really the reason. I mean, that's kind of why Marshalls came about. You know, it's Pete Townsend going to, you know, Jim Marshall going, you know, I don't have an amp to get the sound out there, and he couldn't count on a PA to do it. PA was for vocals, you know, so the big loud Marshall came along, and the beauty of hearing it in a big room like the Boston Garden, it had this symphonic quality in the sense that you were hearing this great sounding amp and this huge ambient, like all this natural reverb, just symphonic, but a very unique quality to it because it was, yeah, Marshall amps loud, but, you know, not in the Boston Garden, but sound was there.
Yeah.
You know, you had that tonality, that sound, and then that natural reverb with it. It just, I just love that era. I like, let's kind of go back there a little bit, bring some of that old magic, you know, back to it. And you were talking about the tracks like before, and because this morning, because we're going over stuff that we haven't played in a while, so I'm revisiting, you know, some of these songs, and there's an AI app now.
Yeah, they can separate things.
So you can listen to the tracks, and what you said, it struck me because you take some of the songs, the early songs we did, rocks and stuff, and you listen to the song and say, great, it's all there. And then you isolate it, and the drums, the bass, and there's 3 guitar tracks, a couple, and that's it. But it all, you know, together, it's like this, a picture as big as some of these songs that have 96 tracks on them. You know, the power, it maintains the power and the presence of the instruments. I mean, it didn't change really from like you know, when they're recording like in the early 50s and late 40s, where you were recording on 2-track, you're recording live, you know, and the way you balanced the sound in those days was how far, you know, the strings were this far from the mic, and the drum guy was a little bit further away, the vocal was much closer, and that's how you did your mix, by distance from the mic. I mean, I just love that. It's so organic. It's so like, you're so easy to just cheat. Like now, you know, it's total AI songs. It's like ridiculous.
Yeah.
I heard that Chuck, when he was recording some of his tracks, I mean, he's recorded a lot of tracks, you know, and what I heard is that he had somebody standing next to him, and when it came time for a solo, the guy would pick the amp up and bring it a little closer to the vocal mic. And that was, you know, I mean,
amazing.
So cool. But, you
automation, real automation.
You know, and with a little compression, it could even it out, you know what I mean? But that's why the stuff sounds so good. It's like we listen back to some of those records that, you know, the classic rock records. I hear stuff now and it just doesn't sound the same. Getting the sound in a quiet way, you know, like in a room where you can have some control over it. Because, you know, we've all heard stories about Jimmy using a small Supro amp. And so I started to explore that over the last few years, and how much of the sound is actually coming from the speaker, how much is coming from the amplifier, how much is it like where the microphone is, the size of the speaker. So I had some cabinets built, some test cabinets there, like this big, with different size baffles, so I could take different speakers out, and put them in and try them, leave the amp the same and try different speakers. And, like maybe, and then I'd call the speaker company up and they would like make me some speakers with thinner paper, or a 20-watt speaker or a 25-watt speaker, which was pretty much what the old Marshalls had. Yeah. Now they make them 70-watt or 100-watt so they won't blow up. Because we used to burn speakers all the time because we'd like crank the stuff up. And, if a company doesn't want a bunch of returns when people say, I've turned my amp up and my speakers are broken. Obviously, if you have an old vintage one, there are guys that can recone the speaker and get it back. But so I did a lot of experimenting with there. I have a couple of those of the boxes that I had made. I've learned that a lot of the sound, I'd say like for the older amps and the small combos, about 50% of the sound is coming from the speaker breaking up a little bit, and also the amp giving you, the distortion that comes from the preamp hitting the power amp. And also the size of the speaker has a lot to do with it, because when you put a microphone that's very directional in front of a speaker, there's a lot of different frequencies coming out of it. And if you have a 15-inch speaker, from here to here, there's a big difference. If you have a small, like a 10-inch speaker, that distance of where the sound is coming from is in a much smaller place. So when you put the fucking directional mic on it, you're going to get more of the speaker. And for me, I think a 10-inch speaker is the shit, A 15-inch speaker for bass is great when you're playing live, but you have to be 6 feet away to actually, because the wave is so big for bass, it does that. So like if you put a microphone right on it, you're only going to get you won't get the thump. That's right. Mm-hmm. So that's why in the studio, a lot of guys there are 15-inch bass amps that work. But it always helps if you get a microphone a little farther away. But I think that the 10s overall work the best. And, I've got, and a lot of times, I'll get like a reissue speaker cabinet, and I'll get like an old vintage speaker and just put one in there, because the other ones are new and they're fine. They're okay to listen to, but the one that you put the microphone on is the good old one. So that's all the stuff that you kind of learn as you go along. And we didn't really know that kind of stuff when we were first recording. To answer your question, I had never been in a recording studio before. Stephen had recorded before, because he had, I guess he had a couple of singles out, but we were like newbies.
When did you guys start learning about studio gear? I mean, did you know the microphones they were using? I assume they use 57s and stuff like that then. What did they use to record your guitar amps?
Like the guitars were typically 57 on the speaker, and then would use a mic further away.
A U87 or something like that?
Something like that, but they just kind of, in the beginning you weren't paying it, you were like so concerned with your own stuff, but and I was just thinking about this, like when the early days of recording, you didn't have there were no tricks, Right. You had one trick, and if you're a studio, you had like a good reverb tank.
Yeah.
That was the only trick you had. And you listen to those old recordings, you go, I don't know, Ricky Nelson, and you hear like drowning, the vocal drowning in this reverb. But that's when you made records, you had to have reverb on your vocal. That's what made it sound like a record.
When I was just listening to Sweet Emotion, in the verse, there's reverb on the guitar. I can hear that during the riff. Now, is that a reverb that's a plate in the control room that's put on in mixing?
The record plant studio, well, the whole record plant, it was on 48th Street in Manhattan, and they had somebody had built a tank down in the basement, and it was basically like a spring reverb, I think, in a Fender amp, but just a huge version of it.
Yeah.
And that's how, but it, every studio had a different reverb.
Yeah.
That was, if you went to Muscle Shoals or you went, Sunset, whatever, everybody had their own, you had to have your own natural reverb in the early days. Nobody had digital or nobody, So all those, one of those things that made those old records sound different.
Yeah.
Was the different reverbs in the different studios. So vocals kind of got their different vocals and stuff.
But the thing is, what you hear, the reverb that you're hearing is put on after the fact, because whenever you start pushing your guitar amp and you start getting distortion and it's starting to compress, if you have reverb on, you really don't hear the reverb until you stop playing.
Right.
So you wonder why, like when you're listening to some of these tracks where the reverb sounds like you can actually hear the distorted guitar, but it sounds like it's in a big room. It's because it's on after the fact. So I basically stopped using reverb on my amps, and I have them put the reverb on after the fact. I have them put it on in the house, in the PA, and also in the wedges, so that it's like in the studio, so like you can have like the distorted sound, but it sounds like it's in a room. But again, you got to be careful, because there's like Brad said, like in these big rooms, there's a lot of reverb too.
Yeah.
But the quality of the PA system is getting so good, and a lot of the buildings we play now aren't just designed for hockey.
Right.
It's funny because a lot of the arenas, older arenas, are designed to make that reverb, which is like totally not what you want for music. You want like kind of, so it's anechoic, so it's dull, so you can actually hear the PA, And a lot of the newer buildings are designed so that they know they're going to be playing music in there, so that they've made them. I don't want to say deaden the sound, but you don't get as much of that echo. Like a basketball game or a hockey game, you want to hear the audience screaming, and so like they have all this echo, like actually amplifying that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a battle between the two, and after a while we got to know which buildings sucked.
What was an arena that was a great one that sounded great to you guys?
To me, never really arenas, but when you get the 3,000 seat old theaters, because in my ear, because of all the wood in there, and you couple like vintage guitars, vintage amplifiers, and old wood, and it's shaped like this. To me, that's where guitars sounded best, and that's what I was always listening to.
Well, I can tell you the worst place was in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a
hockey
square
arena?
box. No, it was just it was like their like arena. And
The place with the dirt floor.
5,000 or 10,000 seats. And
Is that the place with the dirt floor? Do you remember that? Oh no, that was Harrisburg.
That was another place. But this
We
place
played with
was
Queen.
notorious because it was like Hershey, Pennsylvania, with they make all the chocolates and stuff. And this building was like, because what you don't want are parallel walls. You don't want, walls that are exactly like square, because that just gives it place to do this and bounce back and forth. That's why you see like studios with like all kinds of like, things that mess up the the sound, deaden the sound.
Rooms
You know,
like this have all different angles.
yeah,
It's a
I
good-
mean
good room.
that curve there is a good thing. This place was just a square box, and it was hot. And I remember every time we played there, it sounded horrible, and it was notorious. Obviously, they rebuilt. They have a nice arena there now, you know. But you know, I think that like a 3,000 seat theater that's been there a long time, because it's had music going in there, and after a while, the wood even takes. That's what makes an old guitar so good. It's been played and played and played, so it resonates in those frequencies that are like, the wood just kind of breathes with what you're playing. And I think the same could be said for some of these buildings, some of these like the Orpheum in Boston. They haven't.
Yeah.
It's basically the same building as where we saw Mountain. Or the Eagles, or
Expensive winos, and we saw
yeah,
Keith in there, and how
it just
great
sounds
that
so
sounded.
good in there. Because there isn't a lot of natural reverb in the building to start with, and it's just the right size where you can actually hear some of the amps on stage coming off. Those are the places that's where rock and roll's the best, I think. Though a lot of the big buildings, a lot of the arenas do sound good,
How did you guys decide on who was going to play what parts? Now you come up with a riff or something. You guys write a song. How do you come up with the alternate guitar part? Because you guys really would have. Sometimes you would double the riffs.
With Joe and I, it's very unique because it was totally organic. And I've worked with, we both worked with a lot of other players, and a lot, and somebody has let, they need to do it a certain way, and so you might have more, planning, conversations about it. We'd come up with stuff, not even talk about it, because he would, write these riffs, and I just kind of, in some cases we'd play the same thing, but other times I would I just felt something that I thought went well with it, and it would work. It was always really organic, which was like really special.
Brad had a little, had some schooling, let's just say, and so he's got a vocabulary of chords that I don't know, and so he'd hear something and then find something that would complement, and it really worked kind of natural, It just did. We didn't really talk that much about who's going to play what. I mean, it's like
It was like
it
kind of
just
felt
kinda
like
happened.
like this is your bag, this is my bag. It was just kind of knew instinctively. But I was just thinking about, we're talking about the first album and how that was done, and we cut Mama Kin. And I remember I played, on one verse, I played the 4 chord over the 1 chord. And it was a screw up.
Yeah.
But, you couldn't fix it.
Right.
And of course, in the moment, it was like, oh, man. But now when you listen to it, it's like, it's part of the song.
That's right.
It doesn't register that it doesn't sound right or anything like that. It's just,
it's part
it's
of it.
just like so cool.
And your ear gets used to it, and it's like it's not a mistake.
It's
then.
a part.
It's like I guess the best example of that, and that there's something about like the new music. It just sounds so dense. There doesn't seem to be a lot of air in it. Whether it's like steamrolling kind of metal,
Exactly.
or like just like guys that are trying to sound like the Stones, or any kind of rock and roll like that. It just seems dense, and it's hard to get a handle on some of the stuff. I mean, the guitars like sound great or whatever, but I don't know. When I listen to some of the early recordings, there seems to be more air in there, and that's because I think a lot of us all recorded live, like we were playing in a club, but you leave shit on. You have to like be open to hearing stuff. Like if you listen to the beginning of what's the song we're gonna play? It starts off with us trading off the guitar thing. I don't know how we did that.
Saying the nobody's fault thing. Yeah, we traded off the. And then the door slam.
And then you hear a door slam. And it was because back then you, by contract, had to have a union producer.
Okay.
We were recording in our rehearsal studio using the record plant truck. And so, the place was locked down. And to get to our office, you had to go through the live room where we were recording and everything. And so he had gone out to get coffee, and he didn't know that the red light was on because we didn't have a red light. Because like Brad said, we kind of covered it up. They didn't even put one up. So anyway, at that point, they knew better. But anyway, he walked in and slammed the door, and it was like, oh fuck. But it's a cool thing, and it's part of the song,
It's part of the song. It's like, man, whose idea was that? That's so cool. Talking about, like, you talk about dynamics, and dynamics don't exist. If you don't have air,
Right.
you don't have a dynamic at all.
Right.
So some of the more younger, more modern guitar players for the last, 30 years, like kind of some of the shredders, I think kind of as impressive as that kind of playing is, it's not a lot of, it wasn't Eddie. Eddie left spaces. Eddie created dynamics.
What did you think when you heard Eddie Van Halen?
Well, first of all, it was kind of annoying. It's like how he didn't know what he was doing. I mean, we knew a little bit about it. I remember Bill Lawrence used to do the tapping when he'd sit and play for us.
Yeah.
But it was like, damn, he was on this stratosphere, like, it was, like the equivalent of Jeff Beck. Somebody was just kind of out of reach. I mean, and the more and more I listen to his stuff, it just blows my mind because it's so tasty. It's so, he didn't do there was nothing schlocky ever in it. Mm-hmm. And the power, like, when I read Alex's book, if you read that, and then get an understanding how day in, day out, they would get up in the morning and go and play together till midday, every day. Yeah. And then, you listen to these records and you hear the lock that those two guys had, and the power that had. It was like, whoa, that's one of the most powerful bands I've ever heard. I mean,
They were
just...
That first record, when I heard that, it was like they used a lot of the old tricks that we all kind of like did it and left behind. They took it and turned it up to 11, and that first album was fucking stunning. I mean, and Eddie and I remember when they were playing clubs, that he would turn around and do shit so people couldn't see what he was doing, and though if people could see it, I don't think they could do it anyway, but because he was
Jeff
taking...
used to do that once in a while, remember?
Yeah. Who would do it?
Jeff Beck.
Oh, yeah.
In the early days on TV.
Yeah.
He had this one thing he would do, and then he would turn away just to annoy,
Yeah.
just to annoy the guitar players in the audience.
And he would do shit like, stand there and everybody's talking. Every once in a while, he'd just do just one little thing, like, how the fuck did he do that? Just to let everybody know. I mean, he might be playing average, just like fitting in with everybody, but then he'd just do something that would be like blow Eddie Van Halen away kind of thing, just for a second, just so you'd know who was the boss. I mean, he had a sense of humor that was like, he was so dry, and he, like, really quiet, but man, he was so fucking funny. But and I'll tell you, he wouldn't, there were times we'd be in the studio and we'd try and get him to play, and he wouldn't play. You know, he liked to do his solos and stuff when he had alone. You know, so you never. The few times I was in a studio with him and he had a chance to lay something down, he said, "No, I'm not going to do it. I'll take it home and do it." You know, and but you know, I mean, to see him play, I still had trouble like believing that what's coming from this guy's hands is the same thing that's hitting my ears. You know, because his guitar, it wasn't like he was like I've got to play this kind of guitar. I've got a vintage blah blah blah. Anytime when we got to the point when we could get backstage and you know, meet him or something, every time I picked up one of his guitars, it was always like the newest. After he stopped playing the Les Pauls, and it was the newest Strat, you know, and nothing special about it. When I was fortunate enough to play after he passed away, and we were playing with the Vampires, and we did that little bit, to honor Jeff, and I got to play his number 3 guitar.
Yeah.
It was just like a custom shop. It had the latest noiseless pickups. Had the standard whammy bar.
Yep.
And it was like, there's nothing special about this, you know. The only difference was he was using lighter strings because, you know, when you get older, your hands get fucked up. But I remember when he was playing back with Max with that band, I picked up his guitar. The action was kind of high, and the strings were like fucking railroad ties. Really? I mean, but I know kind of near the, you know, as later on he started going with a little lighter strings to make it easier on his hands.
What gauge strings did you used to play back in the day, like at the beginning?
You got to remember when I started playing and we started playing, there was no such thing as light gauge strings. Right. So this music store took lessons and hung out with the guys in there, the salesmen and stuff, and I would buy a set of Gibson guitar strings, whatever, 1 or 2 gauges. And what they told me, you throw out the low E,
right?
And you buy a banjo A string,
yeah,
as your high E. So you made your own set of light strings. At a certain point, I was playing like 52 on the low end because of the meat of it.
Yeah.
But you know, eventually, I mean, even Stevie Ray went to lighter strings.
Right.
There's that fight that's really great when you're like really working it, you know, and it's all like you got to work it, and when you get it right, but it's not easy, you know. No, your hands, like every muscle is going to wear out eventually. So.
Did you guys do your solos in the control room after, or would you cut them live when you were doing takes early on?
Oh yeah, I think
we did a little of both.
I think we did a little
like
bit
songs
of
like
both.
Dream On, for example. Is that a live take with the solos?
Well, that was one when we were probably all in the room recording live. It wasn't too much later that I remember we would do a basic track and I'd leave a hole in it, or we would go for the solos, and if we'd feel like it was the right one, you know, when we playing in better studios where we had more isolation, then we could, you know, go in and redo it, you know. But it was a little of both, I think.
Sometimes you'd go for it, and you know, it was always really satisfying if you got what you liked on a live take.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, oh man, I nailed it, you know. But you know, it worked better when you had to be a little bit outside of it and think a little more about what you wanted to do. But when you were doing it, last thing you wanted to do was think about it. You know, it had to come like just out of the inside.
How much open tuning stuff, like No More has that E tuning?
Yeah.
Right? Now, how much stuff did you do like that? Did you experiment? And where did you even come up with stuff like that? How did you figure things out?
Joe did more open tuning than I think. He'd have to tell you, but to me it was like finding we had it up here, but it wasn't really working in like that standard tuning, and then it's like, oh, I can do it like this. Again, most of it, a lot of it is open chord, but I really didn't do. I wish I had done more of it, because like some of the old stuff, I'll play and like I'll do an open tuning or a chord tuning and play it now. It's like, oh, this is fun to play, but it doesn't sound right because it wasn't a chord tuning that,
Yeah, I've liked it because it was kind of like I probably used the Robert Johnson tuning the most.
Yeah.
And that threw off a lot of songs because that tuning did. And then, but the open tuning for that when the song you just mentioned is like, I mean, I don't know why, because that's not one of my favorite tunings, and it just proved to be nothing but a pain in the ass. I mean, I probably could have written the same riff in regular tuning, but it wouldn't have sounded the same, But,
Some of the voicings are so unique in it because of that tuning that I don't think you could really play in standard tuning.
Yeah. Well, Brad would do it, and it would sound great because it would mix together. Like I said, he's got the chord that would make it sound like a thing. I mean,
a lot of it was like those intros. Like Joe would spend a lot of time finding, like when you listen to that guitar and the opening of that, it's like, God, what a beautiful sounding guitar. And it was like finding that, like trying all the guitars and this and that and going, there it is. I mean, that thing just is all on its own is just like stunningly beautiful.
Let me play that for people that, if they don't know this, No More. Those verse parts have so much swagger to them. Just the time feel is so good in the guitar parts. I mean, it really, and then you have that octave piano going. It just drives it so much. How does an arrangement even come together like that?
I don't know. We just fall back on all the songs we listened to that we liked, and we'd kind of go like, well, is it time for the? Sometimes I think like, sometimes like when there's the break between the vocals, and we'd probably extend those when we were writing the songs. We'd very very often like do 4 times around,
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And then it would be too much because we'd have to chop. But we always kind of like play those parts so that they would, so we'd get enough of them. You know what I mean? But I think by doing that, it made us like get into the groove more, because I know that we did that a lot. I mean, I listened to like some of early demos or the demos, and we would like have like eight times around instead of 4 times,
Yeah.
and then like when you're listening down to it, you go like, wow, it's time for the chorus here. I mean, it's like, and very often it would be, we'd be going like, yeah, but the guitars sound great. Let's leave it 4. And Jack would go like, it's time to, shorten it. And we kind of got, because you have to, put 2 different hats on. You've got the musician that wants to play and loves the guitar. Then you have to stand back and be a fan, and think about, I mean, you learn from the other people that did it before.
What did you call these things? Verse, chorus, pre-chorus? Did you guys use those terms? Oh, it needs a bridge or a middle 8 or whatever people would call it?
Not
Or
really hardcore.
That was about the
but-
extent of it. Just what you said.
Right
That's
there.
it. That's
Yeah.
it.
But like putting like those songs together, a lot of it, like arrangements came from, you'd have like, I got this great part, right?
yeah.
And then you'd play and it was like waiting for pizza to arrive. You'd play this thing and like, oh, wait a minute. What if we go here? And then you'd have a new section of the song. And then, oh, you know what will work? That lick you were playing last week? That'll work. And all of a sudden, you have a song, an arrangement almost kind of fell into place in the process of like I say, waiting. The part's coming. We don't know what it is yet, but it'll show up.
And there's like different formulas to like doing it. I mean, you listen to the Beatles, and you start to, if you really listen to a lot of their songs are very formulaic. I mean, they're brilliantly creative when it comes to the melodies, and I mean, the lyrics were kind of like boy meets girl, girl meets boy, and I'd like to hold your hand, but they were their musicianship made it so interesting, and they knew how to do it so that there was just enough of the verse, and then the chorus, and then sometimes they would start with the chorus, and they would do everything. But yeah, we didn't. I mean, those were terms that we started to
use
We
later.
had like terms for like this is a push here, and I'm sure that would be. There's a musical term for that,
Like an upbeat kick or something. Right?
Something, and it was very, we kind of invented our own language for those kind of things, for the little more of the detailed things. For the bridge, I think I heard the word bridge probably after the 3rd record.
Yeah.
What
I don't
about
know.
songs like
I mean, that's a long time ago, man.
songs like Seasons of Wither that starts out and it has a fade in to that? Now, these are obviously things that you would do later on in the mix, right?
Yeah.
That, would you come up with ideas for things like that?
Jack was super instrumental in the candy and the flavors and the spices, like perfect. I mean, we he was considered at the time the 6th member of the band. It was that integral, and he came up with just all those like cool ideas, and they're not terribly complicated, but they're just those like it's like like Hendrix recordings, and I didn't have a lot of tricks back in the day, but they just
Do the weird flangers and stuff like that.
But then there'd be these little bits here and there, like and like a lot of like there's a lot of like things that you hear. What is that? And it'll be a piece of something that Stephen sang. Like a lot of times he'd just kind of jamming and not necessarily singing words or whatever, and it just ended up on a piece of tape, and he'd put that right here, and then it would be like this like 3-bar thing of a feedback thing that Joe had played, and he'll stick it here, and it's like that's what makes it so much more interesting to listen to.
You gotta like keep your ears open for shit. You know what I mean? You can't go like, well, we won't do that. You know what I mean? Like say the first time we got a sampler, machine. It's samples. It's a big fucking thing here, and like that's the first time I heard the word truncate. But
that
anyway,
was Dude, wouldn't it? Didn't Dude come out of the first sample?
Was Dude, because I was thinking, I love AC/DC. I wish we could write, a shitload more songs like that. But the band takes its own course. Anyway, so I was. The first thing was like, and so we were fooling with the buttons, and then it came out, and it was like, that created a kind of a flavor, and it was like, it was just a mistake.
You're talking about the beginning of Dude Looks Like a Lady, right?
Yeah.
Dude looks,
Yeah.
It was like truncated and messed with. I doubt if we could have reproduced it, because it was a mistake.
And you guys were like, oh, that sounds great.
Well,
Well, it's
helped with
something
the
that you
rhythm.
could have dismissed right away
Yeah.
because said, "Oh, that's a glitch," but
Yeah.
no, it's like there's we always had vision. There was always we were finding shit that was just cool, but like taking that and turning it into that to me it's like it's just kind of talk about falling out of the sky and waiting for the pizza to arrive. It was just like a gift. Like, wow, how did that happen?
The Bruce Fairbairn records, when I think about the Pump record, like Janie's Got a Gun, the intro to that is really unusual. Like the form of the song, it's really sophisticated. And it seems like it's just hook after hook after hook. I'll play the beginning.
It's the sound of my gun. Honey, what have you done? Notice the sound. Son, what did her daddy do? What did he put you through? They say when Jamie was arrested, they found him underneath the train.
Really sounds like a gunshot on that.
Now that
button.
sounds phenomenal.
Well, that beginning part was a riff that Tom had. And Tom has a weird way, I mean, he hears rhythm almost backwards. So, like the when you first hear that, unless you know where the one is, it could be taken two ways. And the same with that one. And that was what inspired the song, because then Stephen, played that on the keyboard, and then because Tom had that riff, and then it just went on from there. And I've heard Stephen say, well, Janie's got a gun. Well, how come she's got a gun? So it was, and then the story went from there. But I remember doing the solo on that, and it was like I wanted a really angry sound, and I remember having a little fight with Bruce over it, and because I wanted it to be kind of raunchy, and because it was, Jesus, Janie's got a gun, and she's been, Anyway, so I had this little transistor Marshall practice amp. I turned it up all the way, and I had one of those acoustic with a piezo in it, and a Chet Atkins thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I had it turned up, and I played it. I played him, and he said, "That's terrible. That'll never work," because it sounded like kind of broken. You know what I mean? And I said, "Well, just run the track and let's give it a try." And that's what the solo is. because I wanted it to sound almost like on the edge. I mean, on the edge and harsh, but still musical. It's all about complimenting the song. I mean, everything we do is like to drive the song, and everything from from our basic rhythm parts to everything.
What was the difference in working with Bruce from working with Jack?
We had to do a lot of writing in the studio with Jack because we were still trying to make it. We were on the road all the time, and then they would say, "Well, you got, we'll take two weeks off or 4 weeks off to do another album or whatever. I don't remember how many, but we never wrote on the road. I mean, we always talked about it, but it just never seemed to happen. Sometimes we would have like 3 or 4 songs that were kind of songs, but then we'd have to write the rest in the studio. And that's mostly what happened we very rarely had an album's worth of songs when we went in the studio in the 70s. And so that's why Jack was kind of more of a part of it, because he was there to help us kind of like, well, all that riff, let's try this here. And Bruce was more of like, let's be able to play the song from top to bottom before we go in the studio.
So more pre-production.
And we did pre-production, a lot of pre-production, and which was kind of ironic because you still had to play the songs, and we still overdubbed a lot of the solos and that kind of shit. And we also had to go up to Vancouver, and because of the drum sound in the famous.
What was it, the Vault or something? What was the studio up there?
It's a garage.
It was in
cement
the loading
garage
bay.
right next to the room we played in.
Mm-hmm.
They would put mics in the garage
It was a
and
loading bay.
open the door a little bit, and that drum sound, that roomy drum sound, came from there. It seemed like he made it famous on "Slippery When Wet" on John's album.
Yeah.
And
also,
so it
yeah.
became like a thing. Everybody would talk about the drum sound from Little Mountain, you know?
And they would put the drums like right at the door,
Yeah.
so it would be, because he would be in with us, so we could all see each other, because you want to be able to see each other. And then, this loading bay, whatever, this big cement room, and they'd put mics out there. And then they would put samples on it.
Well, they did, yeah. That was,
And it was like, what the, anyway.
there was some,
Because samples were like a new thing, and it
Yeah.
was like, it was really like drum sounds that were like samples because they were real drums, but, you had a little more control over them, and it would add a little bit. I won't say that they replaced the drums, but, they added a little bit to it. But the drums just, the 80s were about big drums. Everybody wanted to sound like John Bonham, and it got, well, just add a little more reverb, more reverb, more reverb, more, and, well, he played in a stairwell and all that shit. And if you really listen to John Bonham, his drums aren't that huge and all echoey. I mean, it's all about the tone of his drums, and he had a reputation for being a really hard hitter, but he didn't hit. He got really good tone out of his drums. You can't do that if you're hitting too hard.
too
He didn't
hard.
bash his cymbals. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
He balanced the drum kit in the room. That's why
Right.
it sounded so good.
I think in the 80s, people kind of went over. It was almost like they would start the mix by getting the drum sound, and then trying to fit everything else in. And that's one of the things that bothered me, because the kind of music we grew up with, it was like the guitar, and then you kind of find a place for the vocals. I mean,
it got ridiculous when, the end point to me was like the Def Leppard thing. It was just like, that's not a drum kit.
Right.
It was like boom, and it was, it just got stupid.
yeah, it was.
And the right about Bonham is like, yeah, he had a big sound, but he didn't play hard. he played hard. He was a big guy, but he wasn't like, you know.
And it was a good, you know, but I think people just wanted to do it a little more and a little more, and it got so the drums were getting so fucking big, and it was, you know, it was tough to find space for the other stuff.
Bruce was more of a task master.
Mm-hmm.
It was much more solo, shall we say?
Yeah.
Like you said, he was
John, like what Jack and you know, we were partying in the studio. We would, you know, you'd have a beer. You might be doing any number of things. It was that loose,
and a lot of it,
and all of us, you know. I mean, Jack. You know, I mean, Jack said, "Did you know I was tripping when we did that track?" Like, yeah, me and Jay. I was like, "You know,
no shit." They were,
but we were. It was that kind of, you know, it was a much more party atmosphere. And it was not. Definitely. It was more business with Bruce. We got the job done. It's some great sounding records.
It's like you said. He was like a teacher, and he was just a little guy, but he had a very commanding presence. You know, and it's like, you guys, we're going to get there at 1. You know, and, you know, we would wander in close to 1. I mean, we wanted to get the job done too, but he just seemed like the straightest fucking guy. I mean, I think he had 3 shirts, and 2 of them had ducks on them. Okay. And, you know, and you just would, if you just saw him walking down the street, you'd think he was just like a school teacher, really. And then he pulled up in this beautiful Austin Healey that was like, mint. I mean, it looked like a Pebble Beach Austin Hill, and we go, well, he's kind of cool, actually. You know, okay. We moved to Vancouver because of the drum sound, and he said he knew the room, and to get the best out of Bruce, you had to go to Vancouver.
Our first album with him, Bob Rock was our engineer. So they worked together,
Vancouver too.
You know, yeah. And shortly after that, and Mike
Fraser.
Mike Fraser yeah. was an engineer. And
I remember when we were there. I think it was the second album when Motley Crue was in Studio B, and there was only one computer. You need a computer to run an SSL. And apparently they could only afford one computer, and they had the computer, which with all the automation. Yeah. So at the end of every session, and this pissed us off because, you know, we're, you know,
you're Aerosmith.
Motley Crue over there, but you know, like we're like, and so what's his name? Not Fraser, but you know,
Bob.
Bob Rock.
Wasn't Bob doing he was producing the album?
No, what's his name would literally stand on the board and take Polaroids of where the knobs were.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? And it was like, he's standing on the fucking SSL. You know what I mean? It's like you drop something on, it's like thousands of dollars, and you're and the sessions are over, you know, for a week while they fix it. But you know, it was kind of fun having those guys next door. And I remember one day where I was standing at the reception area there, and Nikki Sixx walks in. He always had like stacks of books and you know, notepads, and said, "Man, you got to see this. You got to see this." And he opens up this book, and there's this guy, like this famous serial killer, who was like on his way to the chair, and he had an Aerosmith T-shirt on, and he said. And Nikki said, "This is the coolest thing. I mean, I can't believe it. You, Steve, this is fucking cool." You know, I mean, it was like, I guess.
Did you say, you know, I don't think that's very cool?
You know what I always, when I hear it takes me back. But Bruce played piccolo trumpet.
Piccolo trumpet, yeah.
He played that thing in Love in an Elevator. Mm-hmm. In the end, I think he did it in one take or something.
Oh yeah,
you know, and it was like you listen to it, it's just like. It's so brilliant.
Yeah.
Where it is, what it is, and it's like, oh, my level of respect for him just went up another notch because it was like, wow.
And Vancouver was a great city. I mean, it's a lot of talented people. We found this guy that like collected. He collected world instruments. He went all around the world and spent enough time in each place to not only buy them but learn how to play them. And that's why on which was it, the second or the third record, where there's like these little musical interludes between the songs, and that was him. And it turned me on to a whole new world of music, you know, because I started collecting world instruments and, you know, like these weird percussion things and made out of bamboo and all kinds of stuff. And I found a place in the Village in New York that's all these guys did was collect stuff. And I would go in there, and I remember one time I walked out with 30 tambourines. I didn't know there were that many tambourines. I mean, I just thought you just went to Latin percussion and just, you know, pick it out of the catalog, you know. But
Remember, I forget what song it was, but I think we put a big piece of plywood on the floor and we stomped on it and recorded it.
I remember Steven doing that for Back in the Saddle.
Maybe that was it.
Or
he'd use a sugar packet.
Yeah,
for
a shaker.
You know, for a shaker.
Yeah.
He was always like coming up with.
You know, that Janie's got a gun.
Yeah.
That's mostly a piano bench. You know, like the piano bench thing.
Yeah.
It's that.
Like closing the lid of the piano, or whatever, right? Yeah.
The bench, you know.
Okay.
And I mean, there's a couple other things in there too, but that's like found sound, you know, and that's what we live by, that, you know.
The backward cymbal, that was another one that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, how brilliant is that?
And that stuff you had to actually do it. You couldn't just press a button on the computer.
Right. Not like on Pro Tools now.
I mean,
reverse.
You still have to use your imagination, and you can get the stuff. It's so much easier on the computer. But I mean, back then, you know, if we wanted to do flanging, you actually had to have a tape machine and another tape machine, and then you had the dial there to change the voltage, you know, to get that kind of sound, you know.
What are some effects that you guys got that changed or that created ideas for songs? Voice box, anything like that?
The talk box.
Talk box.
I used it on Walk This Way, and I used it at the beginning of Sweet Emotion. And I heard about it from actually the guy who ended up being our road manager for a while was like Bonzo's drum roadie for a while.
Okay.
And when they were first touring, he was driving their U-Haul with their gear in it, and he would come by the apartment, and Steven would take out get some of his broken cymbals. Anyway, that's another story. But anyway, the talk box, I never thought, the one that they had, that Jeff used and that he got from Stevie Wonder, I mean, this guy told me how you make it, what it is, and it's just basically a speaker with a tube on the end. So I actually made my own, and had somebody made me a little bag for it, and to this day that's what I use. I mean, I've blown it up about 1 million times, but that's all it is, and I didn't dawn on me to buy one. I guess they made 1,000 of them. I know they were made by custom amps. You know, I guess they were the ones that put them out, and the country guys used them a lot. The talk thing, there was they would use them for the lap steel or the pedal steels, and I was crazy for anything new. And I remember getting the Roland synth guitar, and that's what on the movie.
Oh, yeah.
I used it on that. Or it sounds like bubbles going up. But I think the one pedal that I can't live without is that whammy pedal. makes
Digitech, Digital Whammy.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Digitech
one, and that
Yeah.
the old ones, the first version
generation
of those.
one.
I mean,
Yeah.
I love those. I mean, I use it all the time.
I want to say Joe Walsh is the person that really made the talk box.
That's right.
He
That's
made it
right.
like everybody knew about it.
But it was really
Who also recorded all
Frampton.
his records through champ amps.
Yeah.
And be like, wow, man, what's that sound? That's a champ.
Frampton had the talk box too. That was like
Oh,
the
yeah,
big
yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember we saw Frampton, not Frampton, but Joe Walsh, and it was like 11 in the morning, and he went out
At that
and
festival.
and he had one of those first Mesa Boogie champs, like the little small, one speaker. His guitar sounded so good through that thing. That was all he had on stage, and it was like, I don't know, 20,000 people. But it was the first time I'd ever seen a Mesa Boogie, and it sounded vicious. I mean, he sounded great with that.
Rocks, commonly with people that I've interviewed that are my age, they always will cite you guys, cite Aerosmith, and their favorite record is Rocks. Why do you think that is?
It's so, I just think it's so genuine. There's not a lot of, again, it was 16 tracks, so there's not a lot of muss and fuss about it. It's just right in your face. It's like what I loved about Bad Company. It was that same kind of approach. There was a lot of frills, but everybody doing what they do, and they happen to be great at it. And it's just like,
I think we also had, the first record, we didn't know shit from Shine All. The second record, it was like make or break. We still didn't know much about the studio. The third record was when we started to hit our stride as far as like learning how to record, And then I think that Rocks is when we were like, because we were playing live all the time, and we were always thinking about what songs would be great to play live.
when you
And
play,
that was a big part of it.
when you play, like, people don't have, I don't think, can have the experience anymore. Like, and this went back, to vaudeville and whatever. But when you were performing like nightly, live, you're gonna get greasy, and
Yeah.
it's just gonna start to come naturally because. And we were like, when we would do shows back then, in the early days, we would like, what are we gonna play? So we're not gonna play that one because last night the audience wasn't dancing. We're gonna keep them
Interesting.
on their feet and
Interesting.
rocking, and that combination of the feedback from an audience and playing night after night, there's no better way to get fine-tuned than doing that.
It was a huge part of it, taking that and then bringing it into studio, because we still were writing shit in the studio, but, like the riff for Back in the Saddle was one that just came.
It's from
what?
you started playing the sixth string,
The six-string
and
bass.
it kind of came out of
Yeah, because
that.
I saw Peter Green, who I was idolized, but there would be a section in their show when they would hand him a six-string bass, and he would just kind of do a solo.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of a six-string bass before,
Yeah.
but, I just remembered it, so I got one, and it just came out, the riff, and anyway. But
We were
thanks.
always on the precipice, man, of something. Like when we started out, we were like a New England band. Nobody else really knew us because we didn't go anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
So our first album came out, we sold about 40,000 records, and then, because nobody else really knew who we were.
Yeah.
And it was like that, we were like, we got to, this next record, if they'll let us do it, but the other thing that our management and we realized is, how are we going to sell records? Well, we sell them like we are here in Boston. We got to go there and play.
Yeah.
We got to go there and play. We just started fanning out from New England, and then
Yeah, but
and
we
it
did-
caught
we
like
did-
when we caught like we caught on like in Detroit as if we grew up there. Detroit went nuts for us.
Well-
New York City took us like maybe over a decade to get accepted in New York City.
Yeah.
Because they were so like.
Yeah.
We played once with Roy Gallagher. Remember that in Central
I don't
Park.
want to hear about that.
And it was before we were accepted in New York at all. Roy Gallagher probably had one of the most stunning shows of his entire
He
career.
kicked our ass.
He went off stage.
And we headlined. And he went on first, and he fucking
He
kicked.
went off stage. They made him come out for an encore. He did this encore, went up. They made him come out again, another encore. They wouldn't stop. He came out for 3 encores.
Oh my God.
And then we went out, got on the stage, and I just remember just watching people walk away. Before we even started playing. It was like the show's over, and who are these guys? They didn't care. But he was like, I swear it had to be one of his best
If
concerts
you listen
ever.
to his records now, which I do,
Yeah.
you can see why.
Yeah.
He was a live guy, man.
Sure.
And it was,
You're getting ready to go out and tour with the band, with Robert and Eric from STP and Chris Robinson, you guys. How do you decide what songs to play? I know you guys actually you got together and were talking about it before this.
yeah.
What do you play?
A good problem to have. Too much good music
Yeah.
to play. So it's like you got to, I started thinking about just like you said, being a fan and how much impact can we have? And I realized, man, we've got a loaded gun here. This is going to be really cool. But in the final analysis, so much comes down to Chris, who's going to be like, and he's just this powerhouse.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's
he's one of those
Amazing
singers like it's like you're watching Janis Joplin or something. One of those pieces just power off the stage, and that energy goes right through us and the crowd. And so it would kind of lean a little bit like, man, if Chris nailed this one, and if he's doing it doesn't quite get into this one, then we'll move on to something else. And so I think our rehearsal, which we're starting now, is going to be really interesting and fun.
We've been throwing songs around for the last months. I mean, I've had a few sleepless nights over trying to figure it out because, I mean, I can think of like 5 or 6 Black Crowes songs I would love to do, and the same for STP. And it's like, then the songs that I want to do. I mean, one of the first things I was thinking of was like, Brad's on board, so let's do some deep cuts, some Aerosmith deep cuts. Every time I go out, I always do some Aerosmith deep cuts. With this band, I'm anxious to hear not only some of the deep cuts, but also some of the more well-known ones. I'm not going to give it away because you know what, we won't know until we all play.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I've been telling people like, yeah, the band looks good on paper. It's like,
Yeah, what
everybody's so
happened?
fucking excited about this band. It's great, but okay, let's see. And then, but I'm excited to see how it rolls out. We've played with Robert, I just did a thing, like a charity thing up in San Francisco with Steve and Chris was on the bill, and they sang together, and so we know everybody, you know what I mean, but we've never been like all together on the same stage. I mean, it should work. So,
Should
but
work,
I'm not
in theory.
I'm not like going, this is going to be great. I mean, we'll see how it
So
goes.
YouTube will be the real judge the next day after the first show. It's like,
Yeah.
oh wow, what a disappointment.
I mean,
Oh my God,
this is
I got to
amazing.
get a ticket.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I like doing this because it's loose and it's like I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? If a song starts funky, we'll stop the song and we'll do it. We'll start it again. And it's like I
Can't
forgot
take
who
it
I
too
was-
seriously. It's got to be like, you really want to rock. It's just got to be fun because that's where we started. We did this because we were getting, you know, it's a rock soft thing, man. It's like, oh, I can actually maybe do this.
I said to Robert, I said, you know, really, we're just doing this to entertain each other, and hopefully the audience will come with us. It's just we're playing stuff, and there's going to be songs that people have never heard before, and you know, it's fun to play that stuff, and we'll see how it goes. But it's really like, you know. With Chris, you know, there's certain things that he's gonna. I mean, I couldn't believe that when I talked to him about. He named like 5 Aerosmith songs he wanted to do, like right off the top of his head, and it's like. So I think that, I mean, he's game. He's really into it. So we'll see how it goes. And you know, of course, after hearing I just heard the Black Crowes Jimmy Page live record,
Yeah.
and he sang the shit out of all that, so he's got no excuse,
Right.
You know. So we're just really excited to get in the room, and Robert is probably one of the best bass players
Oh, yeah.
to ever put on a P bass, man. He's something else, and he's so musical, and he's got that funk thing to him too, and it's great. And the fact that Eric, who I've never played with before, they've been, I mean, the fact they've been playing together for so long, they're going to be tight, you know.
Yes.
And
You're going to be spoiled with
I
Eric.
know. and you know, I mean, it should be good. I think it should be good. So we just went through the list. When I was in LA like about 2 months ago, and Robert came over, and we said let's put it, you know, a wish list together, and we ended up with 45 songs, I think. And it's just been slowly like getting edited down and edited down and edited down, and today we kind of like picked out the songs that might be easier to do, and others that might take a little work, and some that, you know, play them 3 times, if they don't rock, they get the boot, you know. I mean, we'll see.
I look forward to seeing the tour. I want to come out and see one of the dates, and look forward to seeing what you guys choose to play. Be great.
Hey, the entertainment might be between songs. You never know, you know. I mean, everybody in the band has a really good sense of humor, I think. So anyway, it's going to be fun.
Well, I appreciate you guys spending the time. I was so excited. I'm such a big fan of you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it was a good time.